the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Vision, mission, and core beliefs.
So our vision is we inspire all students to achieve their potential for learning life in a safe and supportive environment. Our mission is we partner with our community to create a dynamic and innovative educational experience, empowering students to become educated, productive, and responsible citizens. Our core beliefs, we believe our community is vital to our educational success. Everyone is valued and treated with respect and always telling the truth, an educational opportunity for all, student-centered programs, challenging and inspiring learning, in the pursuit of excellence through a strong sense of pride. Our high priorities, enhancing the student experience, investing in teachers and administrators, fostering strong relationships among all, and maximizing resources.
Amy, did we have a patron concern sheet?
We did.
Okay. It's empty. All right. None present. And we'll move on to personnel.
So this evening, Mr. President, I'd like to bring forward Mrs. Megan Buto for the principal's position at North Elementary School. I would like to thank the interview committee, Mrs. Walden, Mr. Cavanaugh, Mrs. Kester, and then also our teacher representatives was Mrs. Weary, Mrs. Mallory Lowe, and then as well as Mrs. Jenna Deere. And then our parent rep was Mrs. Heather Bale. We conducted 2 rounds of interviews. We actually had 10 applicants for the position. So we were very pleased with the applicant pool. We interviewed 7 candidates in the first day, and then we had a second round interviewing 2 candidates. And Mrs. Buto both times came to the very top of the stack. We're excited to bring her to you this evening. She has been a teacher in the Evansville-Van School Corporation, as well as the past 2 years been a principal participating in the EVSC Principal Intern Program. This would be a 2-year contract beginning with the 23-24 school year.
All right, looking for a motion to approve the contract.
I'll make a motion to approve.
In a second,
I'll second it.
have a motion by Mrs. Bowers, seconded by Mr. Colley to approve the 2-year contract. Any discussion on the item? All those in favor say aye.
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 All those opposed, same sign. That motion carries 4-0.
Congratulations, Megan.
Thank you.
Welcome to the team.
Thank you.
So going on this evening, in addition, the following personnel, as you know, we got school coming up here before our next regular board meeting, so we wanted to try to get these in. Do you want me to read through these? Okay. Resignation of Rusty Seymour as business teacher at North Posey High School. Resignation of Kayla Raber as the school nurse at North Posey Junior Senior High School. The resignation of Ashley Lingenfelter as the elementary school counselor. The hiring of Joanne Bogard as the assistant to the director of student services. The hiring of Alicia Slayton for the part-time behavior interventionist at North Elementary School. Hiring of Kay Thiem as a volleyball coach for North Posey Junior High School. And the request to have Dalton Beal, Sean Fisher, Joe Neidig, and Andy Nottingham as volunteer football coaches for the 2023 football season. We bring those forward, the personnel recommendations this evening for your consideration.
Looking for a motion to approve the personnel.
I make a motion, we approve the personnel listed above.
I'll second.
We have a motion by Mr. Colley, seconded by Mrs. Bowers to approve the personnel requests. Any discussion on the item?
Let's make note at this point, as part of the official board minutes, we're going to start including years of experience, degree level, and salary on any positions that the cohort is consulted on.
And Vince, just for clarification, you went down on the recommendation letter, or you also want it on the minutes or the agenda too?
I think it's more important in the minutes.
Okay, all right.
Do you want me to add it to
Do we need to,
this
do
one?
we need to make a motion for that, or is it just
No.
added as part of it?
Yeah, this is part of it.
I think there's only one position on this that they pertains to.
Yeah.
Right.
Any other discussion? All those in favor of the motion say aye. Aye.
Aye.
That motion, all those opposed, same sign. That motion carries 4-0. All right.
You want to close the regular session?
Yeah, we can. I'll entertain a motion to close the regular portion of the board meeting, and we will continue on with the working session.
Make a motion to adjourn the regular meeting.
I'll second it.
Motion by Mr. Oakley, seconded by Mr. Colley. We are adjourned from the regular meeting.
Thanks, Dawn. Thank you.
Thank you,
Nice to meet everybody,
Yes,
and
thank
I'm
you.
excited for a great school year. Thank you.
On my month appointment, that's when they told me that they found two.
All right.
I thought there was nothing,
So we
everything
have
I
a
got
lot of
on.
other people in the room. So do you want to get pizza first?
They, no,
Okay.
no
right.
growth or whatever it said, and
Okay, let's get pizza then, guys.
I wasn't real happy.
And we want to thank Dennis
They hadn't even said it.
for getting pizza tonight. So appreciate it.
Not a problem. Thank
I have some-
Jeff for picking it up. And his napkins. Fill that bus, Jeff. Fill that bus, Jeff.
If I can get that on, make my appointment this morning, I'll drive up that infusion, spend the night, or my appointment, come back and be my next. one.
All right.
She told me.
Hey.
I hope you can get in up there.
Early hours.
Well, I've seen it before, and I called up there, and they said, we need a
Referral.
referral. Yeah. And I'm sure I got an appointment tomorrow morning with my regular doctor, and I'm sure, I'm just almost positive.
I
If
did.
you want the, orthopedics, well,
Yeah, that's a.
5:45 or 5:54.
and,
Looking at it.
he was just so good.
Yeah, and you already know him, you don't want to have to establish.
And it was like talking to him, you know, the gal I talked to the other day was a physician's assistant. She's just like, I don't know how to see a physician's assistant, see a doctor.
Yeah, sometimes they'll explain more to
More
you.
concerned,
Yeah.
explain more.
It's big stuff.
In this case, it was like,
Different.
talk over my head. She had a.
There's plenty here, so please come help yourself.
It seemed like she was more concerned with teaching her than.
Than teaching you.
Yeah. My wife didn't think she was that bad, but I.
We'll see.
Your first impression was not good, so.
Well, and I wouldn't see her again, I'll see the regular guys. I actually called their office and they said, oh yeah, we'll support anything you do, we'll send it in. And the infusion center said, you go ahead and keep doing the infusions here. She actually told me I could do them for 6 months. They have a oral antibiotic that I could take.
That's
You can't
really
take it,
expensive.
but you can't take it longer than 2 weeks. The side effects are just horrible.
Okay, we're gonna go ahead and get started if everybody's ready. So you go ahead, Larry. So just kind of bring everybody refreshers. Back on May 17th, the board met really kind of on their own with the principals and kind of went through and looked at the process that we've gone through to kind of get to this point. We looked at the original priority or the original list that we did with our principals and our custodians as we did walkthroughs. I think at that time Jennifer was with us and maybe even Scott and Angela was with us as well. And we kind of went through and just said, what all needs to be done? What needs to be remodeled or replaced or whatever it might be. And we've kind of taken that list, we've addressed some things, marked it off the list as well through operations over the years, trying to focus on those things. And then we kind of put some things saying that this is a bigger item that we probably can't afford through operations. So it would mainly need to come to a bond issue. And so I kind of passed out to the board that bond prioritized projects. And this was kind of talking to the principals and just kind of going through. The first one on there was North Posey Junior High School renovation of the science classrooms. This was something that was supposed to have been done during the last bond, and I think we ran out of money and it didn't get done. And so that's something that's on the list, and it's kind of at the top of that list. The next one is the North Posey High School renovation of the career technical education wing. I know the board, it may have been Lindsay before, I think you even came on. We did a tour of the buildings and looked at the CTE wing. I don't think the CTE wing's been touched except for maybe some ag renovations for quite a few years. And so that, as we shared earlier this evening, that's an area that we actually generate money for the school by offering those career pathways. And there's a lot of unused space down there from many, many years ago, paint rooms and stuff like that we could possibly reuse and be able to get some really good equipment in there and stuff to be able to help the kids. The next thing, of course, is just over here at North Elementary, the renovation of, it's really the preschool through third grade classrooms. It's that whole kindergarten hallway there as well. That's my understanding, and some of you have been around longer than I have here. I think that is the original part of the building. And so those cabinetry, those kinds of things need to be updated and just to give it a new, fresh look and things like that. We've had some issues with sinks leaking, clogged sinks and stuff like that. And this would just kind of address all those and bring that part of the building up. The next one, this one was kind of an odd situation because we looked at South Terrace. We've talked about what do we want to do there. It's the closest to Evansville. It's grown about 70 kids, I think, in the past 3 years because we're seeing a lot more people coming from the Evansville area out here. And so we talked about, what do we just add on some classrooms to that facility and just kind of let it go. But there's been issues. The kitchen the cafeteria and the kitchen is the original cafeteria and kitchen with South Terrace. That is the oldest building in the district. I think one of the things that you guys have had on your list for a while is the cafeteria tables that are in the walls. I think we had talked about trying to get, or you had talked about trying to get rid of those during the last bond. And once again, that was taken off the list. And then as well, just the ongoing need for preschool, pre-K. The only thing we have over there right now is just pre-K because we just don't have the room ability to have the preschool. And so that would be something else. And so what we kind of talked about was rather than just building on the classrooms, was it better to build on a new cafeteria kitchen addition, then come back, renovate the current cafeteria, stage, kitchen into some classrooms, technology center, music and art classrooms, and then take the current library, which is very small really for that size of facility, and renovate that into preschool classrooms. And so that was kind of what was discussed with that one. And then the final one down there that was kind of put at the bottom of the list was North Posey High School, Junior High School, cafeteria, kitchen addition, and renovation. This is someplace, the junior high, I think, some of the kids eat down in the Mass Learning Center, the MLC. So this was something that was just kind of as well discussed. The kitchen could be enlarged a little bit. The north wall could be bumped down in the cafeteria to give some more additional seating there as well. So that was we felt like that was at the bottom of the priority list when we were talking about everything else. So those were some things that we talked about and kind of came out of the discussion going back to when I first started 3 years ago and did walkthroughs and things. The other thing that we've had 2 presentations on is solar. And as we talked a little bit about that the reason why Greg had actually approached me and said, hey, I'd be interested in talking to some people about solar. And so we've had 2 companies come in. PSG is the one that really, I think, knows solar and understands solar. And some of that is dealing with Jennifer and her connections to Washington, D.C. and the solar programs and stuff. But what we talked about was this is kind of a right time to do that if you're going to do that, because of what's called the energy efficiency money. And I think there might be another name for it, but anyway, and we could possibly get anywhere around $1.5 million back for installing solar here in the district. So therefore, when you look at the cost of the project, the money you come back that you receive back for it, and then as well as just the ongoing savings to the operations fund, because you no longer have that electrical bill on a monthly basis there. And so that's something that can benefit the district long-term going out there. That's something else that we've looked at, and that's kind of now entered into this prioritization of where do you think that fits. Those additional funds, like I said, that saving the operation could help you to continue to renovate and do some things in the schools. Some of these projects, depending upon how we discuss them tonight, we could possibly handle some of these projects or begin some of these projects through operations as early as even next summer, if everything works out and the dominoes fall right. So that's always the biggest question there. So tonight, what I kind of wanted us to try to do is we have Matt Shoemaker here, who is our Stiefel rep. He was gonna, is it Stifel or is it Stiefel?
People.
Okay.
Yeah, you got it right.
All right. Okay. So I've heard it Stifel. Depends on what part of the state you're in,
We'll answer to anything.
So, but since you're down here in this good German community, it's got to be Stiefel. So anyway, but Stiefel is with us. They are the ones who would handle the bonding aspect of it. We have John Mays here this evening. He would be the bond counsel for us. And so Matt's going to actually talk to you about, how much money would we have or could we have to borrow to fund these. John's going to talk to you a little bit about what that timeline looks like. When do those bonds need to be sold so that we can make sure that the tax rates don't bounce back up in 2025. And then Jennifer, and we got solar, talk a little bit about that, touch on that. And then Jennifer is here, as well as Scott and Angela, to kind of talk about projects and stuff. Jennifer and I kind of talked this afternoon. Some of these projects are pretty easy, the remodeling of the classrooms and stuff. But when you start talking about like the career technical education wing, we want to be able to meet with teachers and say, what are you wanting to do? How do you want things laid out? What kind of equipment do we want to include in this new renovation and stuff? So those conversations are going to take a little bit more, and we want to make sure that we have enough time. The other thing is I really want us to have some public meetings in each of our schools to where we talk about these things and get some public input and let people see what we're doing and why we're doing it and stuff. So, so is everybody okay with that kind of agenda this evening? Okay. So, all right. So we're going to start with you, Matt.
Does anybody want a hard copy? Just looking at the screen.
We will have this for our not OneDrive, Google Drive.
Yep, we can upload it to your Google Drive.
I'll stand over here so I'm out of everyone's way. Is it this mouse?
Yep.
You want me to do it?
Or the keyboard. Yep.
Okay. So I know a lot of this is probably going back over it. We've talked a couple times in the last few years about some of this. Again, these are all just projections. It's going to change as we get more information. You guys should be scheduled to get your assessed value here as early as next week, or at least hopefully in a few weeks. Once we have that, it'll give us a lot more information. So what I tell you as of now is just projection. Once we get that assessed value, we'll have a lot better idea of what's going to happen moving forward. So we have looked at a couple different scenarios here. Again, once you guys have a better idea of scope and timing on what you want to do, we'll get this updated. But we've started mostly from a maximum capacity standpoint. So what's the maximum amount that you could borrow without increasing that debt service tax rate moving forward? We'll get into the operations fund just a little bit. I know I've gone over that with you guys before, but we'll touch on that again too. So the blue portion of this graph is the outstanding debt service. the red portion, the 23 payments and the 24 payments, as you recall, that's what you did late 2022 to kind of keep that tax rate where you wanted it to in 23 and 24. So looking forward, we've added the green portion of this bar graph. Those represent the payments from this potential project. We've assumed that you'd issue all of those bonds at once. It doesn't need to happen like that. We'll show that in scenario 2. But if you were to issue all of your bonds in 2024, essentially what could you get without impacting that debt service tax rate? That number is about $15 million. A couple assumptions that we've made. We've assumed interest rates on the bonds would be 5%. If you were to sell those bonds today, you're about 4%. If you'd sold those bonds 18 months ago, you'd be 2%. So rates have gone up significantly, I'm sure, as everyone knows. We kind of track along with the mortgage rates. Everyone knows mortgage rates are really, really high, at least compared to where they've been for the last decade. Our rates are much higher, but 4% in the grand scheme of things, again, over the last decade is about average. It just so happens we had a 3 or 4 year period where rates were the lowest they had been in history. Other assumption we made on this is your assessed value growth. We assume that you guys would not grow whatsoever. As you recall, last year, between the two different debt service funds, you guys grew on average about 18%. It was the biggest year that pretty much every school corporation in Indiana had. Don't expect that to continue. We hope to get some moderate growth this year. I think after that, all bets are off the table. So we have assumed you would not grow. If your assessed value does grow, even a percentage point, 2 percentage points, 3 percentage points over the next several years, it's going to make this graph look a lot better. It's either going to give you more capacity to do projects, or you'll have a little bit of wiggle room on maybe bringing that tax rate down a little bit more, or keeping it even steadier when you look at the operations fund. So this is kind of the first take of this. I am certainly not coming in and saying you should borrow $15 million. Having your tax rate maxed out for 20 years, as a school corporation, you're going to need to do something else in the next 20 years. So this is not us saying, hey, go do this money because you can get your hands on it. It's us saying this is kind of the ceiling if you wanted to borrow this next year in a situation where we're hopefully not impacting that debt service tax rate. Questions on this page before? Okay, so I talked a lot about the debt service tax rate. You all probably recall me being super boring last year talking about the operations fund. We can go over that again as the last page if you want to hear it again. If not, we can certainly skip that. But here we break out your debt service tax rate, again projected moving forward, and your operations fund tax rate. As a reminder, debt service tax rate, you guys control completely. You set the debt service levy where you want it to be each and every year through issuing bonds. The operations fund levy, you have zero control over. It is a maximum levy fund. That levy from year to year can only grow by what's called the maximum levy growth quotient, or the MLGQ. There was just some legislation, a lot of legislation, but with the MLGQ, they capped it at 4%. So you can only get 4% new money in your operations fund the next 2 years. Why that's important is if you ask for 4% new money in that fund the next 2 years, but your assessed value doesn't grow, your tax rate needs to go up to fund that extra levy. You don't control the assessed value, you do not control the growth quotient. So when we're looking at modeling this, we're looking at holding the debt service tax rate steady, but that does not always correspond to a total tax rate being steady. So that's why on this graph, you can see that the rates are bouncing around a little bit. The debt service, we've stuck with where we project it to be in 24. Moving forward, hold that constant. You can see the total tax rate would increase in 25, 26, 27. We stopped the MLGQ after that. These things are changing almost yearly, so at some point these projections become ridiculous anyways. But by doing a project to hold your debt service tax rate steady, if your assessed value does not keep up with the growth quotient, your total tax rate will increase each and every year because of the operations fund. Where that becomes difficult is the public might see you doing projects. They may see their tax rate go up over a couple years. They're going to say that's because of that project. Not the case at all, but it's very easy to get confused because they see the new building or the renovation and think our rate's going up to fund that project. It's because of the operations fund, which you have zero control over. If you came back and said, we want to keep our total tax rate steady moving forward, that would cut the budget significantly. I could run that, but I'm talking going from 15 million to maybe 5 to 7 million. The way school finance is set up for small schools such as yourself, without assessed value growth, and we're seeing this across the state outside of last year because assessed value went up so much. Small schools are going to see their tax rate move up because of the way the operations fund tax rate is. So I know that's not fantastic news, but again, I want to be open and forthright with what some of these projections are looking at or like, not only from a debt service rate, but a total tax rate perspective as well. Questions on that? That page just gets incredibly complex really quickly. Okay, so a lot of the projects that we're seeing now, and this may be completely different, if it is, that's totally fine, but a lot of the projects that we see now of this sort of size, because of the construction side, just take a long time to actually get done. Or you might say, we want to do a portion of this, see what happens with assessed value, come back later and do more of it. So here we've looked at, if you don't borrow all of it next year, and you actually break this up into two different issuances, the beauty of that is you're saving a significant amount of interest. And so instead of paying interest on all 14 million or 15 million immediately, if you do a smaller project and come back in a few years, you've actually gained a significant amount of bonding capacity. The other side also is you can only go out 20 years with these bond issues. You can't go 21, you can't go 22, you can't go 23. But if you wait a few years, then you reset the clock and you get a fresh 20 years. So instead of financing it all at one time over 20 years, if you break this apart by 3 or 4 years, you're gaining 3 or 4 extra years to pay this back. So here we've looked at doing an $11 million, a $10 million bond issue in 2024. That's the green portion of this graph. And then coming back in 2030, looking at your maximum capacity there. So if you break this up by 5 years, we can run this any way you want. Doesn't have to be 5 years. It's kind of where we started. But if you break it up this way, you can get essentially an extra $6.5 million. But again, this goes back to, if you lock up that tax rate, now you're locking it up for an extra 5 years that you can't do anything. So you want to make sure that you're essentially doing everything under your umbrella to make sure that your schools are in a position that you think they can last 20 to 25 years. Anything you would do after that, absent significant AV growth, is going to be a tax increase. So again, I'm not coming in here saying, hey, you should borrow $21 million over the next 5 years. I'm just telling you that's what your maximum capacity would be. Looking at the total tax rate, again, since we're solving for that debt service tax rate moving forward, this is essentially the same picture as you would have seen 2 pages ago. The last page is the operations fund. It's just a calculation. I won't go through this again unless someone really wants to understand the math behind it, but it essentially shows you why that operations fund is projected to go up. Again, you're asking for 4% new money, but your assessed value, your tax base is not growing. That tax rate has to go up correspondingly to fund that extra money. So this is a little bit of the math behind it. Again, I don't think this is the video to go through it unless someone is just super excited to talk about math.
So you said that we couldn't do anything for 25 or 20 years, but then if we staggered that, it would it would push that out to 25 years.
Yeah, so if you did something in 2024, the last year you could pay it back would be 2043. But if you stagger it and you add 20 years beginning in 2030, now you're pushing it all the way out to 2050. So it does get you, essentially 50% more new money, but you're pushing the ability to do more deals off several more years. Again, I've assumed 0% AV growth. If your AV can average 2, 3, 4 points over the next several years, which certainly is possible, it's going to make a significant difference. I just don't want to come in and say, hey, you've averaged 5% the last 5 years, knowing all of that was just from last year. It's not really true of what your assessed value base has done. So you've been closer to staying pretty stagnant the last several years outside of last year. So that's why we're trying to stay hopefully a little bit conservative.
If we did like a 5-year and then they only wanted to do another 5 or 10-year, that's possible. It just wouldn't be
It'd be a smaller amount, absolutely. Yeah, and that's typically what we see schools do. We'll finance the amount of projects to get to the next project. When's the next project? Is it year 3? Is it year 7? Is it year 12? And we have had schools max it out, but they have literally done every single thing on their wish list. That was years ago. Nowadays, everything costs so much that it's really hard.
Yeah.
The money doesn't go nearly as far as it used to, unfortunately.
Yeah, there's no way to project what something's gonna cost in 5 years.
No, 100%. And that's why I say also, in a couple weeks here, if we get your assessed value back and you grew 7%, that's gonna make all of this look a lot better. Then we can update that based on the growth, still assume nothing moving forward, get you a fresh number. But if we go 2 weeks from now and you guys' AV went down, then this number is gonna be impacted too. So it's just a guess right now. It's just an educated guess based on some assumptions. Each year as we get that assessed value, we feel a little bit more comfortable about what we're looking at.
We don't see the same issue we had last year though with the county not getting their assessed values.
Possible.
Okay.
That's possible. So by statute,
Yeah.
we're supposed to be available August 1st.
Mhm.
Last year, I think Marion County might have been the only one that was available by August 1st. Everybody else was behind. You guys were lucky number 92. You guys were dead last. I don't believe that's normal though. I think that was an anomaly for you guys last year. So my hope would be that was something weird and that it would come a lot quicker. It's going to come when it's going to come, unfortunately. We'll see the majority of them in August. We'll see maybe 25% of them in September. You guys somehow in October, but I wouldn't expect that to happen again, but it certainly could.
I know in past discussions, we've discussed trying to have these bond issuances staggered 5 years on average to try to keep the ability to, things break,
100%.
priorities change. So I think that, that's something we definitely want to consider when we do this.
Yeah, I think as you guys narrow in on the scope and the timing, we would simply update that and let you know, here's kind of the next time you could expect to borrow.
Would we not have one retiring down the line someplace or something?
This is our biggest gap, right?
Right.
Yeah, you got a 10-year gap after this one.
So the next one is when?
30.
35.
38.
That looks like
Right.
38 is what I
Yeah.
was thinking.
38 is everything. I'd have to look at my computer to see exactly when each one is paying off. But this takes into account those scenarios.
That's what I thought.
2034.
So at that time, this is not considering that one going off, and it is considering that. So this is filling with just 2 bonds for the next 7 years And then we couldn't pull anything out until 2050.
If
To
you,
keep-
if you did,
if we kept
if you
them.
did that amount under these assumptions, yeah.
Okay.
Which is, I would never recommend that you do that.
Mm-hmm. So then I would also like to see how it would fall out if we just covered those two bonds for the next 10 years until that other one comes out, and try to get some numbers on that, and we'll see how the projects fall as well. But
You're happy to do that.
everybody good?
You got it.
Hey, John Mays is with us. He's going to talk to you a little bit about the sale of the bonds and what that timeline, there's a timeline there with that.
We're going to start with talking about controlled project schedule. And then we'll talk about how that may or may not apply. And then I've got a second handout that's going to be non-controlled projects. So generally speaking, there's two types of schedules that we work with in a lease financing deal that constitutional limits school corporations have, just like other municipalities. And so we've got to go through with this a lease finance process. And there's a threshold set in Indiana law for if it's going to be a controlled project or non-controlled project. And I'll explain those differences. But for 2023, if it's going to cost, if the project's going to be more than 6.1 million, then it could be a controlled project. If it's going to be more than 10 million, it's going to be a referendum project. Now, you can divide a project up and have different series and funding through and working with Steeple, where let's say South Terrace is considered that to be one project. The law would allow you to divide it that way. And so you may, take the 15 million and divide it up into 3 or 4 different projects and keep it under the $10 million threshold. You can't say, well, we're going to do the roof at South Terrace and we'll do, the kitchen at South Terrace, and that's another project. That would be subdividing it. But generally, if you're keeping it building centric, and we can, that could be another 3-hour discussion on how to subdivide a project. But generally, if you're keeping it building by building, that's a safe bet. So the key to start this is to know, what do you want to do? Because to kick it off, you've got to pass a resolution that starts this, that describes in general terms what your project's going to be. And you're also going to want to know what's your budget. What's your rough budget? Because you're going to want to know, are we going to be in the controlled project space? Or are we going to be in the non-controlled project space? So if we're doing a controlled project, you're looking at roughly, if you go to the end of that process, you're looking at 150 days if you don't get a counter petition. So with the controlled project process, a voter could come forward with a petition saying, well, we've collected sufficient number of petitions that'll kick it into this process. That may add 90 to 120 days to this process, where then you would have to go out and get a counter petition. The county clerk would then count them and determine who wins, a battle of petitions. So starting with the projects you want to do, knowing the amounts, and then making sure that we can divide them in a lawful manner that may be under the controlled projects threshold is kind of the work that we're doing now, right? Once we start that process, and we probably, if it's going well, we probably would kickstart that process this fall. Later this fall, you may see a resolution starting this process. And we don't have to have 100% certainty on the project. We can write it with some flexibility, the resolution. It's not like you're writing this resolution with construction drawings. You're describing it in general terms. And then also the same thing with the amount and the precision there. We can have some rough estimates from construction professionals, from design professionals, that'll give you some good ballparks. And then you can sharpen your pencils as we head into the bond sale and move closer. But some of this can be also compressed. I know that we worked on a bond issuance last year, and Steve Full and myself, and we compressed this timeline pretty quickly to get through some of these approvals to position ourselves for a pretty quick bond sale. So we can speed this up with the controlled projects. Hard to speed it up if there's a counter petition. You'll know a lot of that, of how much public opposition support you may have through your public meetings. And obviously the higher number you go, the more chance you may have of opposition. So that's the controlled project process. With the non-controlled project process, it's a little bit shorter. We're looking at right around 120 day process here. And with that, there's no possibility, if it's below the controlled project's threshold, you don't have that petition remonstrance chance. And so you don't have that risk of adding 90 to 120 days to the process. So with this process, you're still starting the same way. You're starting with a resolution the board passes that describes the project. You're still starting with a understanding as to budget, as the amount. That'll help Steve in understanding how much they're going to be going to market, and marketing their funds. But you won't have that petition remonstrance, and then you'll be able to conclude 120 days at the outset, or at the latest. We can obviously speed that up if we need to speed it up. And in this market of rising interest rates today, the Fed announced they are rising, there's the base, another 25 basis points. We aren't likely going to be dealing with that same environment that we've had the past since 2022, where they've been raising those rates pretty quickly. Likely it's going to be holding and maybe even going the other direction. So there were a lot of situations where we were having to rush through these processes, really compress timelines. So we got really good at that. So this gives you a couple of different options. Again, what's going to be the driving force in this is scope of project, the amount that you're looking at, and then if it's going to kick us into a controlled project, what that looks like, the process. And like I said, more than likely we'll probably be coming and working with Dr. Calvin and his team on getting some preliminary approvals out of the way this fall, late fall, so that we're ready to go. And those aren't going to lock you in on really a lot. It's just going to have some procedural steps out of the way. So it allows you to move more quickly if you need to go to market and once you've sharpened some pencils. Any questions? And we can also, once you figure out the project, the scope, you're going to figure out a delivery method. We can build that into this timeline as well. Once we have that, and so then we're going to have, not only just a financing timeline, but we'll also have kind of a construction approval type timeline consolidated for you. It won't be like, and here's when you're going to break ground and that type of thing. It's more of approval of contractors, putting out the bid, those types of timelines. All right, thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Next up, we've got Dennis Stockdale's here and Jennifer Merzlock and their team. Talk a little bit more about the solar aspect, and just kind of talk some about that.
All right. Well, first of all, thanks for inviting us back. We appreciate that. We have some members of our team that came with us. Wanted to put some faces to the names. Jeff here. Jeff is a design engineer, but his kind of specialty, he's jumped right into agrivoltaics. So throughout the whole process, as we look at agrivoltaics, Jeff will run that meeting with students and being just a part of that whole design, as well as our design team that also designs the structures and therefore the other ground mounts and other rooftops. And Grant is one of the project managers. Grant came down to the site visit. He's been, gosh, this is your third time here, I think. So,
yes, it has.
but Grant has done a lot of evaluation, got all the information for our design engineers. Lisa's new to our office, so she's come along to see how we do things in Indiana. She's from the Cape Cod. So I wanted her to see what being a true Hoosier's all about. It you can't get any better than the southern part of the state down here. This is it's God's country down here. It's beautiful. So I wanted to bring her along to show her that part of it. Of course, you all know Jennifer. I'm going to pass. I'm going to hand these binders out to you. As we started after Mike called, we started even dialing some things in and doing a little bit more research.
You're good. You're good.
I've got a couple. And kind of dial looking at things. I know there was the biggest concern before Jennifer takes over is getting the I think it was the elementary school up higher on the meter offset, and we're hovering around 95% again. As we move through things, we dial those things and get them as close as we can. So that's kind of like a second run through. So I'm going to kind of let Jennifer take you through some of the changes that we made from our discussion when we were here last month. And then we're able to hang around and answer any questions you might have.
Everyone. All right. Like Jen said, this binder, there's a lot of tabs. Most of them have like 1 or 2 pages in them, so it's not too overwhelming. But we looked at the specific designs again. We do not have updates at that South Terrace Elementary. That was where you had the roof or the ground mount option. The other thing we may have done is push the ground a little bit further back so you had more of your field, but I think we could have had that version the last time we were here too, just making sure you had that green space. We want to pause there at all, or if you had more thought since we last met of a preference for which options? And as this would go forward, we did due diligence, and if there still isn't a preference, we could look at both. The overall cost, the cost to do a structural analysis and subsurface is pretty minimal to the overall project cost, so that helps finalize the decision and what would make the most sense. We're up for that. And we do see that sometimes when narrowing down the options, is taking that further step of due diligence.
So you have if 2 interconnections are required here, project budget will increase by 40,000, but the net cost will only increase by 25.
Yeah.
How's that?
Yeah, that hit on that, and it could increase by that much. I realize it still says will increase, and I actually it could. I mean, that's obviously an estimate we would talk through. It's because the net, talking about getting that direct pay back, that those federal incentives back. Obviously, if they increase by 40%, that's in the basis for your incentive, and then your net amount increases less than that.
Oh.
That's really the only reason, is to kind of align with those numbers we had in the chart. And it would increase by more, and that could be another reason to help decide which one for the ground mount, only because the runs are longer. And Vectren will help steer that conversation if that needs to happen.
Okay.
The center point. The North Elementary School, that's the one where we had the biggest change. Remember last time we had the low profile, just in the bus area, 35% offset. This is the higher offset. This, I look over at Grant Jeff because I think they did like 9 different designs for us to internally narrow down what we would recommend, and this is where we've landed. That area we know tends to collect water, but we call it really a low area. It's one of the things that Grant's looked into further, and probably why there was another trip, that it's not an actual wetland. It's a low area, and it could be a combination of raising the panel some or just getting the right fill in there so that it would drain. And it would be like the time you could do that if we were out there. I don't know, Grant, if you had more to add to that, but
No, yeah, it's not wetland, like Ben said. We typically tend to use that when it's an actual wetland because there's a whole lot of other implications behind that, but it worked great, like you said, raising or just backfilling with the correct material.
and then this, keeps away from the that hill that's a play area, and then just allows that access to use the length they have the buses parked there. And we can talk through details as we went forward with that bus fencing. We would fence in this array too, right? So would we leverage some of that fence or not, or look at that, or how you're using that space at that time. Any more questions on that one?
So that was a significant increase in coverage, right?
That is a significant increase
Than the last time we saw.
Yes, yeah. I think we really outweighed it. Last time we had that initial concern with the water and looking at cost and implications, and as you can see, the budget's obviously different, being larger, but it also holds it pretty well where your payback is, and given that you're getting so much more offset with it too, it carried out to go that way. And on North Posey, this is the same size system you saw before. If we go into the junior high and high school, it was more of, I don't know, that upside down L or so forth, where we went down in there. We stretched it out to that rectangle because likely it would be a rectangle. Now where it would be could be determined. If we're going to do the agrivoltaics there, you want to make sure that it can be access to however you're going to harvest the crops underneath. So really seeing that that's probably a more likely shape and then could be moved. We can also think through, we were looking as much as like the current mowing patterns and so forth, but that's where we would want to engage with the students and the farmers that help them and determine what the footprint of the array would be. Another thing to note, we didn't increase this, but meetings with Wind Energy or RMC, there could be potential to increase the system size too. And that's really hit on the next page, just showing that could be the maximum you could increase it if they allow that much offset, and then again, some options to move it around. And then the exciting part, is the agrivoltaics. We have a page here. We have a whole tab filled with more. We have Jeff here too. On this, we've, from our reading that we had, crop production is what seems to be exciting for the school, the students, the community here, and getting some of that opportunity to plan it and then research and learn from it. In the back, we talk about what else is considered agrivoltaics, which is some pollinators, which are becoming more basic. With any of our significant size ground mount arrays, we already put in the pollinators now, and I think that's pretty widespread. This is more novel, more interesting of what's to come in the U.S. and especially the Midwest, the dual use of the land. Mm-hmm. The third version is really introducing some livestock, but that's got its problems on really large arrays if it can help with the maintenance, the vegetation maintenance, but the crop growing, so I think would be really interesting for this district, as we talked about.
This timeline at the bottom is after it's live.
No, actually,
Okay.
so I think that's a good point. It might be a good segue if we jump to the second page in the financials tab and kind of go back and forth through that timeline. But we laid out really high level schedule of values, and all this can change, everything is refined, which you guys heard about in the beginning. But what we were proposing was you could hit notice to proceed all at the same time. There's more planning with the agrivoltaic version. So the two elementary schools would follow a more typical construction and would run together, where this would really lag potentially up to a year behind, but you wouldn't really kick off the construction the next summer. Given that, so in that timeline, and when we say year, this is really more like school year. So this first year, it's this coming school year that you start planning with the students, Future Farmers America, and the farming kind of mentors or supporters they have, to start researching where crops make the most sense. Like, what are we already growing here? What could we be growing here if they had some shade coverage? And then what equipment's required and access required to harvest that and so forth. So it'll help lead to the final plan of the footprint and the design. Some of that can be done in parallel with the interconnection. I mean, the electrical to AC sides. That's something to determine ahead of time, run that in parallel, but this would really be an opportunity that the students this year, whichever group you started with, so maybe it's juniors and seniors work on it. Obviously, the seniors graduate, and then juniors become seniors next year, and then they start seeing it under development, help with that, and then it can keep building on collecting the data, harvesting the crops and so forth. But that first year would be pre-construction.
Is that where you can also maybe leverage the direct pay to pay for?
Yeah,
the
so
project?
the other part I want to hit on by staggering these, if you look at the first page in the financials, you do the elementaries first, you could see that you're going to get a direct pay of really over $700,000. And then that can go into the next one. And I want to caution, because this table, when we show the years of payback, assumes that direct pay brought down your net cost and helped with that payback. But if you're looking at 20 years of paying off bonds anyways, you can say, okay, we do the two elementary schools and we're going to get $700,000 back to use how we want. Well, that could invest into the junior high and high school one, or can invest into one of the other projects you listed through. One thing I wanted to note, we're assuming a 36% direct pay. If you remember, the direct pay is 30%, the adder you are eligible for is 10%, which really brings you to 40. As it all stands right now, these projects go in next year, the following year, they're going to be penalized if they're not domestic content. We're going conservative, assuming 36%. There's two things that can change. There's going to be a waiver release that we would fill out, try to get that waived and be back up to your 40%. And/or there's always announcements about domestic. So if we see it changing right now, it's so constrained, it's hard to get that domestic content. And the first release was very, I guess it was like stricter or tighter than everyone expected, the guidance for domestic content. We should get another guidance this year. There's a lot of comments put back to try to have it build up over time. What we have right now, if you see like panels manufactured in the US, they're actually assembled here. But the guidance requires that, the raw materials, the cells and the wafers be here as well. And that's not realistic right now. Not only do those plants not exist yet, unfortunately, like the machinery to build the production lines, build those plants aren't in the US yet. So for all that saying, 36% is what you can get if you can't get the waiver or if they don't relax the guidance. I think is, Mike started out and what we've heard, it is exciting that these projects, in addition to you invest the money, you get some money back that you can reinvest. Again, you're opening up that operating budget with the utility savings you have. So we always label everything as like avoided utility costs because it depends on how you finance it, right? And it's got to net out against your financing. And if it's in the operations budget, it's the net out paying back your financing. But if you're able to use bonds, pull this out of your operations budget, then that avoided utility cost is actually true operational savings.
About 150,000 annual savings out of operations.
Dennis, was that what you were saving over there at your school district?
We were saving, yeah, ours was a little different because we got ours in under the net metering, so that was our benefit. But we were seeing, the interesting thing is we were seeing about $100,000 annual savings without the credit. You had the credits in there, that put it up to about 200,000. But with the one, but the interesting thing to note here, those rates continue to increase. So when we looked at what we were anticipated paying our utility rates in year 12, we were actually paying those in year 6. So that really pretty much doubled that savings for us over time that we would have paid out.
Yeah, and Dennis's system was much larger too.
But mainly what you're saying is you're locking in your electrical costs
Absolutely.
rather than
Right.
Yep.
whatever the electrical company does to you.
Right. When
Yeah.
you don't have to worry about those rate increases, and now you know in your budget and operations what you were paying, that 150,000 that you were paying in utilities now is, and it might help offset increases you might have. If your AV doesn't increase, but you have to increase the rate for your operations. Well, now you've got money there to help offset that. Or if it does, AV does increase, that gives you that much more that you can do projects annually over time. Kind of helps you plan that out over the next 10 years. Because you can do a lot with $100,000 in a couple of classrooms. And if you do that every year, you can keep cycling that through and keeping things fresh without worrying about going out and getting more bonds or raising tax rates.
And to Dennis's point, how we show 60% offset right now at the high school and junior high, that is one that we really need to talk to the IMC and see how they would handle it. Obviously, you've got the field to build it larger, but it could become diminishing returns if you're exporting that too much, where there's still value. I don't have it right in front of me. Like CenterPoint still values exports. It's still a lesser degree than what Dennis saw in 2018, but it still has value on it. Obviously, and Duke still values it. Duke's valuing it right now a little over 9 cents a kilowatt hour. But it's to be determined with wind energy.
And that's where Jennifer will take that from. Once that, if we're selected, you move forward, then she'll take that and she'll start working with Wind Energy, do all that to negotiate all that stuff for you. You don't have to worry about that.
I know last time we had a lot in front of you. This time we tried to summarize
still
it.
a lot.
I know, it
It
is still a
seems
lot.
like everybody else knows what's going on, and I don't. So I'm gonna ask
Ask all the questions you want,
Please.
yes.
What's our initial investment? So let's say we're doing this first page right here, we're gonna do all 3 of the schools. And our initial investment is at the turnkey budget, is that what you're?
Yes, that is.
So it'd be
the sum of all
1.7
three.
at the high school
Uh-huh,
and 860 and 1.1. That's money we'd have to come up with through bond or something like that to start this project,
that's correct.
okay? And
The
the
next,
direct pay,
mhm,
that's money we're gonna get back for using the,
that's from the Inflation Reduction Act, and that's money you would get back. the
And
direct
that's-
pay, and that's not dependent on domestic content or anything else.
And that's something we get one time back.
One time back.
Yeah,
Mhm.
okay.
After the projects go live. And so that was why I was mentioning that if you staggered these and did the 2 elementary schools.
And you know what? I bet you if I subtract that, that comes up to that next list, doesn't it?
Uh-huh.
Wow. I had math a long time ago. The payback is over 14, 11 years. So after 11 years, what does that mean?
Well, that payback, I should say, it's a life cycle payback, but it is a straight CapEx payback. So not knowing if you're gonna bond it or if you're gonna borrow money, like which financing fees you would have, that would just say,
Okay.
we had this huge rainy day fund or something, and we're gonna spend it all now on this, that would be your payback. So just looking that all that, that first year, you get a big chunk off with the direct pay. You get these avoided utility costs like we talked about before. There could be some of that RAC environmental attribute benefit, which is actually not calculated in this. Just right now, the direct pay and avoided utility is included. The projects would pay back, so then meaning everything avoided would be all yours. Yeah, if you did it with the bond, that avoided utility costs would be operational savings in year 1.
And also note from last time, the panels are warranted for 25 years. The inverters, you can add warranty to coincide.
We do
And-
have our budget for
and-
20-year inverters, yeah.
And 30 to 35 years, it's still going to function at 85%, probably the panel degradation. So you're still going to produce energy 30, 35 years from now at least, if not more.
And the last question I had on this chart, the 30 years avoided, that's what we would end up not paying because we have
Yeah.
this in instead. So we'd
Yes, exactly.
say
You wouldn't pay that to Duke or
3,
Centerpoint.
5, 6, 7, over $8 million.
Mhm. With a fairly conservative utility escalation. It takes that into account, it takes degradation of the panel.
Right,
Yeah.
right. What do we pay utilities now every year? I don't.
I-
We have that.
Just a minute, let me look.
I don't think we.
I have that corrected now.
Because you have some gas, right?
Well,
We have the year 1 avoided utility cost.
so you see, in
Oh,
for the
yeah.
2 elementary schools, electrical's gonna be close to that 90,000 more.
Do you see that, Larry, that year 1 avoided
Well, yeah,
utilities?
that's about
Yeah.
what one
It's
year,
about
would-
1
that's
year.
about how much we'd save per year.
But
That's how much you would, yes, avoid per year.
Yeah, but that's not what we're
And then
spending.
we'd still
more
have,
than
then
that
we'd
Yeah,
still
yeah,
have
right now.
40% of the one.
Because these aren't covered 100%.
Yeah.
Okay, all right.
So like in 2022, health clinic, we spent, and this was Centerpoint, and it was $1,386. Central office was $4,200. Bus transportation garage was $3,806. North Posey High School was $115,785. North Posey Junior High was $58,381. North Elementary was $70,708. South Terrace was $71,512 for a total of $325,781 for the year.
So you can cut that in half.
How does the refund work for the direct pay, the timing of it?
Yeah, that's a good question. Historically, it was just the investment tax credit that was available, and that was on, like, when you filed your taxes, you put that in. For the direct pay, because it's not tied to tax obligation, how, the initial guidance is on a quarterly basis. So if you finished it, you would be able to, you don't really invoice it, right? You fill out the form, and it would come up every quarter, is their plan, to keep it, I think to make it like doable for the administrative level, federal level, but then make it available more often.
So if the project
So-
finished in January at some point, we could expect maybe around March.
Yeah, and then there's probably like their net whatever days, but I would expect that
Right.
sometime between like March and May you'd get it.
Yeah.
But if it finished in, March or April, now you're talking
Mhm.
like June to July.
Yeah.
Getting it. Yeah.
Yeah, that makes sense.
I just got invited earlier this week. I'm gonna be in a working session next week. It's got 2 sessions. The first one's next week, and then there's gonna be another one just on direct pay and rolling it out and how there's 2 ways. They don't want to overburden nonprofits and public entities on their end. The form's likely just gonna be a 1-pager to fill out. The cumbersome or complex part is this domestic content of what it's doing and the clip that's eventually gonna go in 2026. But then I think it's also at their end because there's just not that many. I mean, it's only so many Treasury and IRS employees as well. So I think that's what they're trying to look at as well.
And
Just laid off a
then,
bunch.
and the bond
Yeah.
council will advise you where you can put receipt when you get that back. There's different ways of doing that, but it all depends on, the advice you get from bond council on whether you can put that in to other projects with it, whether you have to pay down debt or whether you can put it into rainy day.
So, and that could be tailored like to every school. Because the federal level, this isn't like a grant that there's strings attached that could only go to this project or go to something specific. You have that flexibility. But I would say, we're coming close to a year now. So this was passed in August of last year. And there's still so much that's complex, ambiguous, so forth. That is the biggest lesson I've learned. It's a huge piece of legislation that's gone through. And just the amount of time it's taking to plan it out and give that clarity.
They didn't plan that ahead of time.
Stuff like that, everything's on the chopping board 30 seconds before something's signed.
Mhm.
Someplace I thought I saw how long it would take to install the,
Yeah, that's on the next page, really rough.
oh, okay, I see it.
Yeah, but, and Grant can jump in, but really boots on the ground is much shorter than you would think. We would kick off the project, do the engineering, get the utility approvals, and start procuring the equipment. But then once we mobilize,
Yeah, once we mobilize, it's, depending on your system, we typically see for at least the 2 elementary schools, 4 to 6-ish weeks once on site. Our biggest hiccup right now is the availability of electric gear. So what our collector panels, what everything collects into and eventually ties into your building. We're looking at ridiculously long, almost a year out in some cases, lead times for those, which is across the board for a lot of electric equipment, transformers, switch gears, stuff like that. But typically what we've been doing is as soon as we get that notice to proceed and hone in on that design, we send those out right away so that we can not have such a long time. That's not to say that we will not install your rooftop until we get that gear. Sometimes we'll install, let it sit for a couple weeks, and then once that arrives, come back and interconnect your system and then turn it on for energization.
these are obviously high level schedule values. We would work in, it's actually not very disruptive of building it. The bigger things are the day the cranes are here loading something on the roof. So we can work around spring breaks or weekends or after hours and some of that. But then when I say boots on the ground or boots on the roof, it's not that many. It's not very disruptive. We have some that we do over summers just because we follow a re-roofing process and roofs get put on in June, July. We come July, August, but we have a lot of districts where we work during the school year when the kids are in session. Look, we're all tired this time.
I want put one up, and we can put cows underneath it and stuff, so.
You don't have to mow the grass.
I would told you it was sheep.
What, I
Those are gonna be
guess I
sheep.
hear.
I'm
You
a
know, there's
cow
some
person.
intelligence level with cows of,
Oh, no, not cows.
getting themselves into electrical equipment, where, and of course,
Definitely not goats.
goats can kick, yeah.
Goats don't eat at all.
Yeah, or they'll jump on the panels.
Yeah.
Yeah, listen
Sheep are
to,
most prevalent.
listen to these guys talk, especially Jeff talking about the agrivoltaics and understanding that the hops, crops, the
Mhm.
yields are higher when they're under panels. And then they had a big discussion about wineries or the grapes
Yeah.
under the panels, the production
Oh, that's
yield is higher.
fascinating.
So,
Yeah, there's a lot of shade tolerant crops that actually grow better with a little bit of shade from the panels, especially with the increasing temperatures each summer. They're more drought resistant.
We can make wine.
That's
Yeah.
right. North
And
Country
Make
Winery.
it, but we
Yeah.
sell the grapes.
We can sell the
Considering
grapes.
the new junior high
To
French
the
and Royal,
craft.
Falcon Distillery.
Yeah.
Any other questions for Jennifer? Okay. Over to our next Jennifer.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Well, you know how to get a hold of us all.
Yeah.
too.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you all for coming.
Yes.
All right, Jennifer Kiefer is up now.
So really at this point, we don't have a lot of new information to share. I did bring the whole breakdown of all of the different projects. If anybody wants me to pull those back up, we can look at them. But I didn't want to do that unless we've been over it quite a few times. So really where we are with this is if a project needs to be part of the operations budget versus part of the bond, it's going to kind of determine on how we start the project and when we start the project and how we progress forward. So I think if anybody has any questions about the breakdown, I know we've identified high level of which projects were on the broken down list, but then from there, which ones become part of bond and which ones are part of operations is really our goal. Because like I said, if we're renovating, Mr. Galvin kind of explained this. So if we're renovating an existing classroom, we don't have to go out and do a lot of the geotech, the investigation, civil. There's a lot of parts of the project that wouldn't be part of that. So it's a quicker timeline. But if it's a project that's more involving, like the South Terrace cafeteria, and we're really evaluating the site, we're doing a lot of those things too. So I think it's important that we understand which projects are priority and which ones go for different parts of how it's going to be broken up in the timeline so that we can work together with the board and start to develop the projects. Because at this point, we really have bubbles on a piece of paper with some high level estimates. And so the next step will be to really start understanding the full scope of these projects so that we can really dig in and start to get more defined budgets. So that really helps identify the bonds and where you go from there. So do you have questions about the breakdown of the projects or anything that we can help to answer today?
So, a lot of it is just, we've talked a little bit about cost. I think costs are coming back a little bit more in line than, to where it was pre-COVID. But that's, in order to kind of start saying, okay, yeah, these are the projects we want to begin preliminary drawings on, that then allows us to get some preliminary costs of, okay, does this fit into our scope or does it not fit into our scope? So that's kind of where we're at is kind of saying, okay, well, these are the things we want to do, or no, we don't want to do this thing, so let's take that off the list or whatever. So that's kind of why I brought solar in tonight, because that would definitely impact, the amount of projects we do as well as the bonding and how we do that. But it could open up, kind of like as we looked, of ongoing projects, continuing renovations over the next so many years and stuff. So you have some choices and options, I guess. So, kind of like going back to that old game show, what's behind door number 1, door number 2, door number 3.
Right.
So as far as the high level cost estimates that you guys have completed, those are, if I remember right from the last time, fairly conservative.
I believe so. We had also added some inflation value numbers in there.
Yeah.
There's some items that have somewhat remained kind of came back down into like the normal range. I wouldn't say anything's came back down, but it's just kind of held steady. But knowing that we'll be potentially starting in 2025, I think most of that is fairly relative, but like it all depends on how the drawings progress. So if as we're going through these things, you really start putting a lot of expensive items or, really specialty things in there, that could really increase. But I think we can work together to mitigate where we are and try to keep that under control. And I'm not sure if the numbers that were in that document included the inflation number, if they were on the overall sheet, or if they were the beginning.
When you say conservatively, they were conservatively high, right?
Well, at this point, since we have bubble diagrams, we really looked at a square foot cost for that type of facility. We didn't go into a detailed opinion of probable cost where we actually looked at, this is the material we're having on the exterior, this is the type of roof we have on it, this is the type of doors, this is the type of windows. We don't have that much detail, so we can't develop the cost more than a just really high level square foot cost.
But that was conservatively high.
I believe it's within the averages of.
I think what we had, Jennifer, was career technical education wing was about $2,242,800. The cafeteria kitchen was $1,931,907. North Posey Junior High classrooms was $480,700. Renovation of kindergarten through third grade classrooms was $1,051,052. South Terrace cafeteria addition was $4,307,625. Renovation of current library in the preschool classroom was $48,700. Renovation of current cafeteria kitchen into an innovation technology center, music and art classrooms was $963,675. Total cost was $12,722,438. And we kind of projects was $11,458,459, and then additional construction cost was $1,263,979.
So was that the total sheet in the very beginning? Okay,
Yeah.
so that sheet has the adjusted inflation numbers for the years on it.
I think you gave me one, and then you came back and said, "Hey,
Right.
here's more an updated one." And
Yes.
so that's the one I used
Okay.
for this one. You guys had that in that May 17th presentation, so. And I think, like I have said, I would stick around with kind of what Matt and I were talking about, was sticking around the 10 million. I would not recommend you going to the full 15 million.
We just have a hard copy of that. That's not on here, right?
No, I can get that. Are you talking about on the Google Drive?
Yeah.
Yeah, I can get that added in.
It's convenient. It is convenient.
Yeah.
I'd
It has
start
been
to figure out how to use it.
And as far as timeline, I think the sooner we can understand which projects are part of which part, the better, more successful these projects will be, because that allows us time to, like Mr. Gavin said, meet with if it's CTE as part of the bond, meet with all the teachers, meet with people, have conversations, understand exactly what's going to go into that project, and then be able to get the drawings done in time to be able to go to bid by the time that the bonds are issued and go to construction.
You had mentioned 10 million, but I think it was mentioned earlier, we're looking at 5 to 7 million if we wanted a truly level tax rate, because that growth quotient is going to bring it up anyway, right?
Yeah.
And that was for 20 years.
Yeah, because the growth quotient is going to compound every single
Right.
year. So eventually, if it keeps going this way, just your operations fund will be more than what your tax rate is. That will take a while, obviously.
Right.
A lot of things could change from the state level legislatively, because completely make that moot, but as of now, yeah, that's what all your peers are kind of fighting right now.
I'm the kindergartner in here, guys. This is all like very overwhelming.
Yeah,
It's overwhelming.
it is every time.
Doesn't matter how long you've
So,
done it.
yeah.
You're spending a lot of other people's money.
I mean, I think our next steps is to digest that list of project cost, determine priorities amongst ourselves, and then give the guidance back to Jennifer.
When do we need to get that stuff to you? I mean, is that something we need to do at next board meeting or
I mean,
in the next couple?
ideally, the sooner that you make the decision, the better and more successful the projects will be, and I think that would go for anyone.
And we can do it on a project by project basis too, if we wanted to. If-
This is
I believe
definitely
so.
gonna be in there, or?
I think it depends on how you break up the bond, because they're gonna need the information to know how much money they're gonna bond, which
Right.
if it's part of the projects, then it also needs to all be figured out at the same
Okay.
time.
But I guess as far as progressing on design and stuff like that, if we decided, yeah, tomorrow we want to do the career and technical education week, then you guys could start on the design part of that before we even issue bonds and go through that whole process.
Yes, that will need to be started before the
Yes.
bonds are issued, because you'll need to know a better idea of what the cost is gonna be.
Right.
And I think, from my understanding, is you'll want to break those projects up by school so that you end up having smaller projects.
So as you guys look to plan, typically what schools will do is they'll get that list and they'll prioritize, like you said, and they'll have a line, they'll say, these are absolute needs, like these have to be done in this time period. So it might be, this needs to happen now, or this needs to happen in 3 years. And then you might get down to, this would be nice, but it's kind of more of a want, we could go without this. And then you just start looking at the numbers and figuring out what you're comfortable with when it comes from kind of a payback. So if your needs are 4 million, I know you guys are super conservative, as you should be, maybe you just start with the needs, the smaller amount now, see how AB works out, come back in a few years, has that list changed, what are our needs now, and kind of chunk it. You may go and say, everyone's in need. I don't know. We obviously can't answer that. But that's typically kind of how you get through this, because I know it's overwhelming. It takes a long time. But if it's, these are our 3 needs, great. Let's go handle these right now. We'll come back in a couple years when we feel more confident about everything that's going on from a tax rate perspective. Identify the needs then. If more money opens up and you guys are comfortable, then sure, maybe you can do a little bit more. But that's typically where schools start, because otherwise you can just go round in a circle for months and months and months and never get anywhere.
Can I ask a question? Just so I can, just like how our projects can have the direct pay coming back to invest. How much does money opening up or assessed value impacted by more students being in the district? So like I heard in the beginning, making updates that elementary school close to Evansville could increase that student population there.
So that's only gonna affect us on the education fund, not the operations or capital projects.
And really, when we have that study separate.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I
three
mean,
levels.
you gotta,
So-
typically you're transferring 15% from your ed fund to your operation. I don't know if you guys do more, but then okay, that's usually the rule of thumb. So if you have more in your ed fund, you may not have to or you could transfer maybe more, but to get over to the operation. But usually it's, with districts like this, usually you're having to, especially with transportation costs, your transfer may be going up.
And the really good thing about solar is if you can pay for it out of your debt service fund, like they said, you see the true value of it, right? So you're seeing that savings, the true savings in the operations fund, because you're paying for it out of debt. If you can aggregate some of those savings for a couple of years, maybe you can knock off some of these projects as well. So again, I'm not the one who's going to tell you it's a need, but if solar is a need and you decide you want to do it, that can be part of kind of that long-term plan to maybe knock out some of these other wish list items in year 3, 4, or 5, if additional money is not opened up through assessed value increase.
I know we've knocked out a lot of this stuff over the last couple of years with the ESSER funds, but is there anything that jumps out to you guys as have-to items that you see coming up in the next 5 years?
You know, we've taken care of some mechanical issues that were priority, but other than what you mentioned with the improvements, CTE and the needs at the schools, nothing. I think you guys pretty well touched base.
We're moving to the doors at the junior high and high school, replacing those original doors with the safety grant. So, no, my fault.
No, we wrote door access control
That's right.
for the junior high and high
The
school.
junior high and high school.
We can access $100,000 a year on that safety grant, and so it'll probably take 2 more years to finish the junior high and high school because it's a very large project. I'm actively looking for additional safety related grants that we could maybe also do doors at the same time, but as of right now, it's access control only in that grant.
Is there any other operations or projects that we had scheduled for the operations funds?
You're doing life skills now, but nothing else. So what I'm kind of doing right now is going through and building a 10-year facility plan.
We've got the gym sealed.
Gym ceiling, we were going to have come out of the GEO bond.
Okay, and the rest of the bleachers.
Bleachers are already paid for, that came out of the GEO bond.
Oh, the top bleachers.
All the top bleachers, that's not been put anywhere.
That needs to be looked at more than anything, because that's more dangerous part than the lower ones are. The lower ones where the kids are down there, but it's old people like me that fall up and down those stairs all the time.
Is that at the high school?
Yeah.
At the high school, yeah. But different size steps and different heights and.
What's the status of the wastewater treatment?
So that one, we actually met with the USDA on Friday, and they stated, we also invited Josh Hood, who's heading up, I think it's Wexler, who's handling the sewage between Blairsville and Wadesville. He was here with us as well. The conversation was that mainly what they're moving towards is a regional water management process. Unless you're a large city like Evansville or like Poseyville has their own. But you probably have heard or probably know they're bringing the Welcome Center. They're running a line to Poseyville, and then my understanding is they're going to hook in Stewartsville to that as well. So they said that this was definitely a doable thing to hook in the high school to the Blairsville project. They looked at, I think I don't remember the exact cost, but it was going to be around $1 million project. But I don't know if that was all on us, because they would be hooking in other neighborhoods as well as they came down through there. And then the USDA, the gentleman with that, he feels like that would probably be, that they could probably cover 70% of that cost in the grant. So, but that's all just early preliminary discussion. So that's why I hadn't actually shared it with you yet in an email or anything, because they were going to go there. They have connections to the top state people at who handles and sends all this money in places and stuff. But Posey County is definitely a focal point right now with that. So there are actually businesses like ourselves that has a standalone wastewater treatment plant. They're wanting to do away with that. So that's why that even puts us kind of a little bit higher up on that project. So.
I feel like looking at these, it's easier for me to say that, well, I can say, I feel like most things you could say are one, other than maybe the CTE wing because they bring us money, even if it's not a lot, but it might actually draw enrollment things as well. I feel like it's easier
Better
to say
return on
that as a,
investment.
yes, we
Mhm.
could attract people by doing that, but I feel better prioritizing that as a something to do.
Your classroom remodels, your junior high classroom remodel of science labs, your elementary classroom remodels over here, we could possibly handle that out of operations. And especially if you did the solar, then definitely you could probably handle that out of operations.
We've also said that in the past.
Correct.
Not
But you had your guaranteed energy savings came off, so you now got 300,000 yearly that's kind of saved in there, so.
It's also easier to piecemeal those. I can do two, I can do a grade level, I can do, you know.
Yeah.
Classroom furniture doesn't change all that much over year to year, so.
I agree though that the career and tech wing
That seems
is,
like an easier thing to say, yes, that's a.
it's at the top of my list.
And it's honestly a good chunk of money that comes in for the CTE courses. Many of them that are in the high wage, high earning, or high demand, like manufacturing and, you know, those things that are in our area that are high demand are gonna earn us about $680 a student per semester. So that adds up quickly.
I would think our enrollment in those classes would increase if we increase, it's the dreariest looking classrooms in the whole school. And like Mr. Galvin said, I don't think they've been touched since 3 years before they built the building.
Yeah. They built the building around.
It's some farmer's old barn.
The welding stations were first and then.
Like I said, the reason why the junior high science classrooms were on there was because they weren't done during the last time. That's why I put that as number one. But that I agree with you. The career technical to me has, as and exactly why Larry said, since I've walked in, that has kind of been at the top of my list.
Yeah. South Terrace, a lot of, that's gonna take care of overcrowding too out there, isn't it?
Yeah, and it provides a preschool, another preschool class.
We had some thoughts on that. So, I mean, just the more we've kind of talked and thought, and I mean, we could even go back to the drawing board on that and think through, are there any things we could do just internally without the extra on the outside? You know, like, could we revamp that kitchen? Is there, you know, if we're going to lose the stage anyway in this project, does that open up enough seating in the cafeteria, and do we remodel the kitchen? I have no idea. These are just thoughts. These are not.
I just know they're crowded right now, but having that enrollment study scares me to go spend a ton of money to make more room, and then your enrollment goes down. Agreed.
Agreed.
What wasn't the cafeteria, the eating area, the lunchroom, wasn't that going to be divided into like 4 or 5 different, like a library maybe, or
Art room, music
art room,
Yes.
music room?
If we had an addition.
Yeah.
If we built an addition, then they would.
Oh, if we build an additional cafeteria, yes, that's what I meant. Okay.
So then the
You were
thought
talking
kind of
about
was,
this.
instead of building a large cafeteria, do you then later with some savings, if you did solar savings, then you just build like a media center, a smaller, less complex, but that's where you put like maybe art, music, and the, you know, innovation. I don't, again, just thoughts, but is there place to work around and not such a big project? Could we reach our goals with some more thought on that one? Aaron might kick me, but.
I think it's about time we really sit down. We really need to sit down and pair them up and say, hey, we want to do this. Then let's look at this, and then let's look at this. I mean, we need to get that done probably soon, don't we? Or am I'm what'd you call it,
They'd
kindergarten?
probably like
I'm
to do it right
kindergarten
now.
too.
You're
I've
pre-K.
not done this before
You're
either.
pre-K.
I'm pre-K. Okay. All right. I'll go along with that.
What's that reverse time?
I'm pre-K, you're kindergarten.
We
No,
have to.
You seem to be a bit.
Sorry, right as you take a bite, sorry.
So you will need to issue bonds to keep your tax rate from falling if you so choose before the end of next year. Which seems like a long time away, except that as John talked about, the legal process, depending on the size of the project and where these are in terms of buildings, could take 3 to 6 months. Before we start that process, we need to have laundry lists of what you're looking to do. Doesn't have to be exact, but what does need to be exact is you're gonna approve a number, a maximum borrowing amount. In order to approve that maximum borrowing amount, you need to have given your design team, here's what we want to do, so they can drill down in the scope to make sure that $6 million is enough, or $4 million is enough, or whatever number you decide that you're comfortable with, what you do with those dollars. So when I say the end of next year, and it seems like a long way, it's going to go very, very fast. So I think the sooner you can sit around a meeting of the minds and figure that out, I would think ideally you'd want to have kind of the projects in mind at the very latest by the end of this year, if not even a couple months earlier, ideally. And then you got to get through the legal process. You're not going to truly design until you're through the legal process. And again, depending on how much you do, that legal process might be fairly short or fairly long. Then you're going to go to the design team to really get all of that done and be ready to bid. But the process just takes way longer than you would think.
We don't need to be dragging our feet then.
The process will drag your feet.
Lots of dragging the feet.
I'm new to this too, but could we put on our normal monthly meetings a part on the agenda for the next, just
Yeah, we could talk about it.
discussion? Obviously, unless there's something to be voted on, but obviously just leave a block for discussion always there so we don't.
Yeah.
Gives us at least every 4 weeks we're talking about it.
I mean, I think the way most of us have talked, this career technical thing is something we definitely absolutely want to do. Is that something we could go ahead and start to work on that, or is that something we need to wait on, or I don't know.
You cannot really, tonight, this is a working session. What I would probably encourage you to do is actually have in a regular board meeting vote that this is a project.
That does that, okay.
Yeah, this is a project that we definitely want to move forward on.
But we can easily have that, like you said, set it up every month. We're going to talk about these, and if we talk, especially let Amy join the conversation, and we talk next month, and maybe we decide, yes, this is what we want to do, then we could make a motion and vote on that.
Or like Jennifer said, if you said, yeah, we want to proceed with North Elementary, South Terrace for solar, then you could proceed with that aspect. Because you could also get anticipation notes.
And the other important thing to remember is when you set a number, when you actually start this process and you set a number, that's going to be a not to exceed number. So if you're setting that number at the end of this year, I know there's inflation numbers in there, but you want to make sure that that number is high enough to when you're actually bidding, maybe an entire year later, that that's going to take care of your projects. On the flip side, if you set the number at 6 million or 4 million, it doesn't obligate you to borrow that full amount. So if for some reason we get to next fall, like a year from now, and your assessed value does something completely unexpected, it goes down significantly. You're not obligated to borrow that full number. You can come back and say, well, okay, we're not comfortable anymore. Let's do a portion of this, and CTE is most important, or solar, whatever that is. You can come back and then piecemeal it at that time too. So we're setting a not to exceed number, but it does not obligate you to borrow that full amount. A lot of times you're setting that number a year before, so you kind of want to set it artificially high. Then it's up to you guys to figure out exactly what you want to get done when you go to issue that bond, and it could be less. And a lot of times it is a little bit less.
So I have a question. Normally, I just worked this timeline backwards for another project, and we had a bond sale on November. Basically, the bond sale had to be at the end of November. So working backwards for the project timeline, obviously we wanted the bonds or wanted the project numbers in hand before we sold the bonds. Is that how your group prefers it as well, to have those numbers before you sell the bonds?
You mean like the bids?
Yes.
Oh,
So that way you know exactly what
So
that.
typically, if you're doing
project's
one large project, right, we're building a new school. Yes, because that's kind of what you're doing. Here, you might have a list of 6 different things that you're doing. When you go to bid, if something comes in over, you might have to cut something.
Yeah.
You might bid a bunch of alternates and deducts. So it's nice to have some bids in hand if you can, but a lot of times the schedule just doesn't allow, or we're issuing bonds maybe when it's not ideal time to go out to bid. So here, I'm assuming this is going to be more of kind of a laundry list, a bunch of projects. So I don't think you necessarily have to have all the firm bids in hand by the time you sell bonds.
Okay.
What else?
Anything else you want me to get for you guys?
I feel halfway educated. I feel I've learned something tonight.
Yeah, we could
The problem
get
is if
that.
I remember it tomorrow morning.
The project list and the numbers. I think.
Oh,
it's in Excel.
okay. Yep.
And then we'll schedule time in the August meeting to go through these. And
And certainly, if anyone wanted a working session beyond that, we could
Right.
do that.
Is this, are we gonna do that at the actual meeting?
yeah,
The
I think
public meeting, okay.
we'll schedule a small block of time and we'll discuss priorities and numbers and if we decide that one of these should go through, then we can send it through.
I think that's an excellent idea.
If there's anything else, any other information you guys want, just shoot me an email and I'll give it to you. Okay? So I got the Excel spreadsheet. I will get some pricing on those upper bleachers, so we have that. So I'll reach out to BSN rep and get that taken care of.
I think the lower ones weren't working, was one of the reasons.
That was the biggest
The
issue,
upper-
yeah.
My biggest concern is the danger, not the.
They do think those steps, and maybe I'm wrong, but I know sometimes when those are put in, I think they've been put in more for handicap purposes, aren't they?
I think that's a requirement.
Yeah, I understand what you're saying though, because they don't
It's
make any sense.
the worst requirement that they've ever put in.
Should they not
It makes
be
it more
though
dangerous for everybody.
uniform with each step? You know, you got an 8-inch step and a 6-inch step. And you know, old people walking up and down them.
I don't like uneven steps either.
I mean, it's not required, they be that, and they're just required to have that step in there, right?
I believe so.
Yeah, I'm not opposed to the step, I'm just, they need to be uniform, so.
Mhm. I'm opposed to the step. I think they're too short.
They are. I hate the
They are
football ones too.
awful.
I know, but when I was athletic director in Harmony and we first put those bleachers in that gym and everything, and I had people come up to me and said, we need steps, we need handrails, I said, you're doing fine. Now, I remember running up and down and stuff. No.
So I would like to thank all of our consultants
Thank you.
for coming
Thank you,
in
guys.
tonight. I appreciate it very much, all the
Thank you for the
information
pizza.
you've shared. Thank you for the pizza.
Oh, we want to leave one for Amy,
Yes,
yeah.
that's what I want to make sure Amy
Yeah.
had one.
All right.
I'll let her know it's here.
So I don't think we need to adjourn, do we?
Nope.
We already did.
The World Cup's tonight, Dennis Rodman's daughter's playing, so.
Yeah. I met him in person one time.
Who are we playing?
I met him in person.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
It'd be a long time.
Yeah, yeah. Like, cause my uncle,
My friend's daughter
my
used to
cousin
play.
and I, we had a business trip there, so he just took us with us. And we were like in the mall. It was just a random sighting, right? Like we're in the mall and
Yes,
just here.
thank you, it's very important.
What'd you say? Like, he's like,
Very
giant.
important. Although I do actually. Although I probably could figure out where to find more.
Well, Larry, the founder, the developer, his daughter just finished. She played at University of Michigan and then she played on the DC team with Rodgers' daughter.
Really?
Yeah, she's just now going into like masters and stuff. But yeah, she played professional soccer for a
I
while.
don't know how I knew that that was good stuff. I told my wife, she was just, I was at school, I was crossing.